Hey guys, so today I'm going to talk about a topic that recently I posted about on Stack Exchange. Somebody had a question. They were trying to edit a file upload field from the experience editor. And they were trying to attempt to do that with the .editable on a file upload field. Obviously, there's not field renderers for that type of field out of the box. I mean, you could technically build your own if you wanted to, but I wanted to talk about the other approach that I suggested in that post, a question or the answer that I provided, which was where you can create a custom button that allows you to, it basically loads up a modal inside the experience editor, and it allows you to edit those fields. It can be a file upload. It can be, it's also very useful for like linked items. For example, if you had a multi-list field, or if you had a multi-list with search or a drop list or a drop link, some of those fields are very hard to edit. If you do editable on some of those, it'll just show a GUID, which is not very helpful. So if you want to change what it's actually linking to in that example, you can use this method that I'm about to show you. So to get started, most of this is all through the Sitecore instance. There's no custom development that's needed to achieve this. There is alternatively a buttons that you can create that you can trigger custom speak applications or even cheer applications depending on what you want to build. These are outside the scope of this discussion, but you could do that. And then, for example, maybe you have some sort of control that repeats from a large collection set. If you wanted to, you could trigger some sort of modal that comes up with some sort of paginated page of data that you could edit from that interface. Obviously, that's more complex and not something you necessarily want to do, but yeah. So the first step in this process is to go over to the core database. So I'll go over to the core, and then I'll go into the content editor. And where everything you're going to be making changes to, a lot of the tutorials I'm going to show is done within the content applications area. I don't know how much I've talked about this, but inside the applications folder is kind of, I would say, I don't know if this is the accurate term, but this is more shear related application information, whereas in the client area up here is all the speak related application things. I can definitely say in the client is where you'll find all the speak. I don't know if they blend the lines at all, or if this would even be considered shear only application items. So, but you'll find a lot of the things that you would want to customize potentially inside here, such as if you wanted to make changes to the content editor and change some of the menus or ribbons or things like that would be found here. There is also different things here, like you can change masters, tools, but down here at the bottom, you can actually customize the web edit. The web edit is basically the experience editor, or an experience editor section of the interface. And, there's basically the one we're going to be working on today is the custom experience buttons. But there's other options. There's default placeholder buttons, default rendering buttons, edit frame buttons. So if you ever create an edit frame, which I'm hoping to do a tutorial on eventually, is edit frames. But if you built an edit frame for something that might be outside of a normal kind of rendering frame setup, you could do that here and then specify and pull these items into your frame. But I'll go into that in a future tutorial. But today I'm mostly focusing on just the customer experience buttons. Now, there's kind of architecture and structure that you should think about when you're creating these. The ones you see just listed here are out of the box options, and they are also kind of generic. So I think if you're going to be building a lot of custom experience buttons, you should probably there's going to be ones that you're going to build that are very generic. Like, let's say you had a title field and it's always going to be the title field and you use it across the board all over your site. And you might create some sort of customer experience button that edits that title field and you can use it across multiple renderings across your site. Whereas if you had some sort of article listing and there was some sort of field that you wanted to edit only in that one instance, I would say maybe it would be best to create a folder structure, going to insert from templates, go into common, create a folder once it loads, and just selecting folder and kind of organizing these so that, you know, when you're pulling from these later on from the master database, which I'll show here in a minute, you don't want it to be just this massive long list of these custom experience buttons. You want something that's kind of more organized, not just for you, but also for potentially your clients or even people inside your company that might be making changes later. You don't want them to be completely confused how to find some of this stuff. So, like for example, I'm building this for the article section, so I'm just going to call it article. And probably something I should have done before I jumped into this is just taking a look at the article template. So let's go over there and just take a look real quick and see what kind of fields we can pull over. So let's go into blog and then the article that I've created in the past. So we have body content and we have contributors. So this is actually a good example. So you got to make sure you keep note of these fields. And actually, in all honesty, taking this name is not a good idea. I'm going to show you what you really should be pulling in a second. So let's say we want, I've actually created a file upload field for, I mean, it's unlikely that you would have this for an article unless you wanted to allow people to upload PDFs or something, but you probably wouldn't have them specific to an article. You'd probably create some sort of, maybe you'd have a multi-list of uploaded PDFs or something like that instead of just one PDF. But anyways, it's just to show kind of what I'm doing. So upload and contributors is the fields I want, but I need to make sure that I have the right names for them. See, these names or these descriptions are actually could be titles, and I haven't really used that in prior training because this really should be body space content. But it's something you should do when you're defining your templates. You should be defining kind of content and entry friendly titles for your fields instead of using just the item name. The item name, in my opinion, is for development, and the title on a field is for the content editor. So when you define these fields, you should really define them for your development purposes, and then build more content entry friendly field titles for your content entry personnel. So that being either a internal resource or if you're consultancy, you'd have clients. So if I go to the example and I find the article template and I click on it, these are the titles that you can pull from. So I'm going to want contributors and I'm going to want upload. So, and then what I was speaking about, so let's say I made this upload file, which I'm going to have to change this back, notice it's actually, compressed together. If I actually go to that item in the tree, because it creates items, when you use this interface, it's creating items that are a field item. If you click on upload field, for example, you'll see that it is pulling in a template field template, and which it just defines settings for that field. So one of those fields is a title field. So instead of having it smashed together like that, because it's more for programming, especially if you're using some sort of auto generator to create your glass models or something like that, you don't like underscores in your properties, for example. If you had spaces, it would create a property of upload underscore file, which is not very attractive from a development standpoint, in my opinion. Whereas I'd prefer it to be smashed together and just be upload file smashed together without the space. So you can actually name it that, and then just here you would, say upload space file. So pulling the names of the fields from the items, the content items themselves is not a good idea because the title might not always, it's pulling the title field, so what you're pulling might not actually be its name. So just keep that in mind when you're building these custom experience buttons, that you need to go to a template to figure out what the actual field names are, the item names for those fields. So I'm basically pulling this is what I'm pulling. So I'm going to go back and just switch this back to upload so I don't have to have issues when I started finding this field. So now I'm going to go back to the core. And then I'm going to go to content editor. And now I'll go back to the applications and the web edit and the custom experience buttons. So I created the article. The next step is to create the button itself. So to find that it's in the templates, system, and all the way at the bottom is the web edit folder. And inside there's a bunch of different options. The one you're going to be using is the field editor button. But like I've said in the past, you can select, for example, a web edit button. This allows for customization. So by default, the field editor button it's a kind of a built-in out-of-the-box Sitecore button. It's already got settings that you can customize, and then it will trigger something that's already built in Sitecore. Whereas if you use a web edit button or one of the other options, you might have to actually build all that logic where it triggers the modal and then it shows the interface, and you might have to create an example file to represent what you see when it loads whatever it is into a modal. So this is the option that you would want to do, at least with this scenario. But like I said in the past, there's other scenarios where you might want to customize that further. So I'm just going to call this, for now, I'm going to make it very specific to what I'm doing, and I'm just going to call it article display. So I'm building a customized experience editor options list or button list for the article display. And one of those custom options is going to be a custom button called article display. It's not the greatest name in the world, but it's for that article display rendering, if that makes sense. So I'm just going to give it some title. This is basically just a header for that button. You can give it an icon. So just pick something that you think represents whatever it is that you're doing. You don't have to customize it. You can leave it as just like a blue thing, but I'm going to select just this document dirty option. I also like to customize the actual icon for the item itself. So I'll just do that same option, just like that. And then you'll see an option where you can put in fields, type separated list of field names to be edited by the field editor. So you can just put one, or you can put more than one. So in this instance, I'm going to put those two fields that I mentioned, contributors and upload. And then you just provide a tooltip, upload or modify linked fields for article display. And that's it. Now we have this custom experience button that we can now set to our rendering. So you could, like I said, you could have more generic ones, and you could set these to multiple renderings. And that's where you start having to think about architecture, because it's kind of difficult because you have to specify here what what fields that you pull from. So if you have very generic fields on your templates, then you can build very generic custom experience buttons easierly than you could now. If you have very specific, like you had article display contributors field, you're limiting what you can do. And I actually believe that being semi-generic is a good idea. Now, there's sometimes you're going to run into conflicts when you do that, such as with title. You might have a title field, but then you have something like a meta title, and then you have maybe a header title, which may or may not make sense, depending on what architecture you have. But yeah, so that's that. Let's go switch over to the main or master database. So we go over to the master database, we open the content editor, and now what we're going to do, we're going to make changes to our rendering article display, which I think are an example. So renderings, articles, and now article details, or article details or article display. I guess I use those two names interchangeably. So now if we scroll down and we go to this editor options, this is a really cool area of the rendering that I really think more people should customize. You should write descriptions about this rendering. You should really, if you have, depending on what settings it has, you should have some sort of parameters template. Never rely on the kind of default parameters where you can specify whatever you want. You should always kind of create parameter templates so that it has to use specific templates or specific fields. You can, add additional options for the rendering. So open properties after you add it. So if you add it to the experience editor, you can make it open properties right off the bat. Editable just means you can make changes to this. Data source locations is if you have other data sources to article details. It's a pretty rare scenario for article details, but if article listings might have a data source of other listings, so the default listing criteria would be most recent, but you could create a listings data source for that rendering that pulls in it differently or pulls in a customized list of articles, for example. And then you would specify the location, and you'd also specify the template for that data source. Lastly, or almost lastly, is compatible rendering. So if there's renderings that are similar to this article display, meaning really that they use the same type of data, is really what this means. So if you had two content blocks, but they visually look different, and maybe visually the HTML within those blocks are actually different, but the data that is being pulled into them is exactly the same, you'd want to set up compatible renderings. And what this really does is when you're working in the experience editor or working with the content editor's presentation details, when you change a rendering that you already have in the PLID or in the experience editor, it will actually suggest items or options out of the compatible renderings area. And then lastly is the one that we're really talking about today, is the experience editor buttons. These are basically pulled in from the core. So basically everything that we defined in there is now defined in this option. So what we're going to do is we're going to select article and article display, which we had already created. So now we have it selected. So now when we load the article details rendering, which is only on a specific page, so we'll have to specifically load that page, and we load it into the experience editor, it should show this option as when we click on that rendering, it should show it as an option to then edit that. So I'm going to go ahead and save, and now I'm just going to go ahead and demonstrate. So I'm going to go to the example, home, blog, 2017, and click on test article, and then I'm just going to go over to the experience editor. So I'll click on the experience editor, which is in the publishing ribbon. And now you'll see on the page, I have two controls. This layout is very, very basic, but I had a form already on it. And then now I have this is the article details or article display rendering that I already had. So once I select it, you should see now that I have the existing options, this existing buttons, which I believe you can disable as well. If you want to disable these for specifically this rendering, you can do that. I'm not exactly sure where that's at. I would have to research it a little bit. But you should also now see that there is an option to click on this custom button that we created. So now I click on this button, and now suddenly you have this option. You actually are being pulled in the fields from this rendering. It's pulling in those fields from the template. It's pulling in, and it just knows what fields you're trying to edit, and because it's pulling in the article content items, that it knows it needs to edit contributors, it needs to edit upload field or upload file, and these are really tricky to edit through the traditional experience editor interface. Typically, what you do for some of these fields is, I must have these marked as model, not glass models, but which I should probably show in another training session. That's why I can't edit them. But typically, you'd click these and then you'd be able to change the text, and that's the traditional way of making changes for the experience editor. But now we have this new option, and we can just make these changes without you're on this item, you're not really seeing this information displayed, but you're still able to make changes to it, which is a very powerful thing. I mean, an option that you do have is that you could build these custom buttons for all your controls, so that even if there's fields that are not being displayed in this rendering because it only needs to display one or two fields, you could have the ability to edit all the fields for this template type if you wanted. It would mean a lot of manual changes, because I'm not sure of a way to pull all the fields by default, but it's definitely an option. So that's it for today. I think it might be useful to do a session on the experience editor in full depth on how to develop for it a little bit more. This would probably be something I'll probably mention in that, just to reference it, but I'll talk about how to make the fields more editable and just development for the experience editor. I think a lot of developers only focus on the content editor and focus on the very front end and not the experience editor. So if you have any questions about this, please feel free to reach out to me, and please feel free to subscribe to my channel. That'd be extremely helpful. If you have any questions or topics that you'd like to see, please feel free to just reach out to me, comment, whatever, and just suggest topics, and I'm happy to do topics on anything you specially request, because I'm more than likely going to do special requests quicker than just random topics like I've been doing over the last few months. All right, that's it.